Your next career move could be the one you never imagined. Web3 nomads, everywhere jobs for anywhere people.
And we're back. And this is episode 2, new and improved episode of Exit Liquidity. So today we have our special guest, Haym, who you may know from Twitter as SalomonCrypto. And we have a fascinating discussion in store for you on liquid staking derivatives. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us, what your background is and kind of how you got into the space and all that.
Yeah, cool. Well, first of all, thank you guys for, inviting me. I'm super excited to be here. And if you have seen me all on Twitter, basically the only thing I care about is Ethereum, and what that means in this phase of development is staking. So super excited to have this conversation. Thank you. So real quick about me. Let's see. I studied computer science in undergrad, and then actually left the entire industry and moved to St. Louis, Missouri, where I worked for Anheuser-Busch for 5 years. Started doing technology, and then moved over into corporate finance, into cash management. And then the best title I'll ever have in my life, no matter what happens, was I was the director of finance for Bud Light. But left in 2018, just had some family stuff, and then 2020 happened. And then so life is chaotic, and then it was I think it was May 2021. I listened to the Bloomberg's Odd Lots podcast, and I heard oh my god, Hayden Adams explaining Uniswap to the Bloomberg guys, and that was the first time. Again, I was in computer science in 2013. That's when I graduated. I read the Bitcoin white paper when it came out, and I was working in St. Louis when Mt. Gox happened. And I watched this whole thing happen. I just was busy worrying about bushels of wheat and stuff. But then in May 2021, I heard Hayden Adams explain Uniswap, and specifically this idea that the whole point was that any people could trade any assets, and you could just create this market. And maybe the market isn't big and doesn't have liquidity, but that's just not possible today. And that blew my mind, and kind of opened up the rabbit trail. And we can talk about kind of the journey from there to here. But that's how I got involved.
Very cool. Very cool. Let's go into that a little more. How did you, because when did you start your Twitter account, and how did you kind of find your niche in that area?
So, like I said, I heard the podcast in May 2021, and then, man, this is the first time I've admitted this actually publicly, but I bought my first ETH in August 2021, and then I put in 90% of my capital between late September to November. So my ETH cost basis is until recently, it was 3,900. I think I'm the only person who's stuck around who has almost 4K cost basis, but we all entered in a cycle.
Most people entered during the boom of a cycle, and then it takes till the next cycle before they really, if they stick around, they can.
For sure. And when we're all going through it the first time, right? I was sitting there being well, I understand that everyone else is just joining for the hype cycle, but I am a technology person, and I get it.
He's in it for the tech.
So how much money I lost in Ohm. But yeah, I mean, so I first I just started throwing money at it like everyone, and then for me, I found Bankless, and that completely changed my life. And I have so much respect for those guys, because they are what it takes to go from 0 to 1 in crypto, in DeFi, or maybe in Ethereum. Because they don't know anything about anything else, but that really and it was specifically, they had an episode with Curve Market Cap that explained what Curve was, and that was when I realized okay, well, first that was when I realized there's this whole dynamic, interesting world of DeFi that I need to get involved with, and then it was also that I realized that Bankless is really good from 0 to 1, but like they cannot get you from 1 to 60. So again, so much respect, but like
they have a lot of good interviews. Like I think their podcast is like full of fluff. That sort of bugs me, like how much fluff there is.
Yeah.
Like it like just the whole like market updates and like, you know, just the constant shilling of things. But like when they have like actual content and interviews with interesting people, like there's some like really, I've learned a lot from that show before, but like you said, like once you get to a certain level, you kind of have to go it alone, because there's no podcast that's really going to get you to the next level of understanding.
No, that's definitely true. I mean, I don't know if that's like a problem with this industry, or like that's how the world works. You know, it's that like the whole like you can only create like an industry about creating content at like a certain level. You know, like once you're above that, and like once you're like actually like blazing the trail and like figuring this stuff out, and like you just, first of all, you don't have time for content, and second of all, like if people are making content, like I write so many threads on EIPs that I know will never see the light of day. And like I'm doing it because I'm doing my research anyway, and I just figure like I'll put it out there. But
and honestly, writing is such a good way to like actually test whether you understand something.
Yes, yeah.
Because at least for me, like I'll run my mouth off, like I know what I'm talking about, but like when I actually have to put like words down, like either explaining something to somebody on Discord or Twitter, or just writing like an actual blog post, like once I have to actually like get those thoughts and compose them in a format that is easily digestible, like that's sort of the test of whether or not you truly understand something. And it also like it allows you to like really structure your thoughts in a way that like you don't necessarily get, at least the way my brain works, like it tends to be kind of scattershot. And then like once you start like crystallizing these ideas, everything kind of like ties in nicely. But like prior to that, you can kind of have like ideas that you realize you didn't really have strong, you know, foundational knowledge to back up. And then then you go, as you're writing, you're like, this is true. And then you're like, but wait, why do I know that's true? And is that actually true? And then it sends you down a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
And so like, it's, I mean, actually, like, I think it's an essential part of research.
No, I don't know how general this is, or if just like some teacher said this to me once in like 4th grade or whatever, but like, I like really, really, really believe that like, if you can't explain something, you don't understand it. And, you know, like how many times have you been talking to someone and you're like, oh, you know what a roll up is? And they're like, yeah. And you're like, why don't you explain to me what a roll up is? And I think actually, so just going back to like my origin story. So like I was listening to, you know, just trying to get more involved with so start with education. And then I realized like, okay, Discord is like where things happen. And I just like got in Discord and like really just like tried to get involved. You know, I spent like 4 to 6 to 8 to 10 hours a day sitting in Discords, like answering randos questions, just trying to be helpful. And then in the background, I was like doxing myself to teams, applying to jobs, like offering to work for free, like in a lot of projects, but like specifically the one, and like it's so funny knowing what I know now, but like, so May of last year was in my head, it was like so important because Tokamak was doing their like core 3 event, and like Redacted has Hidden Hand, and it was like this whole huge thing, and it was like the biggest flop I've ever seen in my life. And like part of that was look, like they didn't do a good job. Both of those teams did not do a good job. And like a huge part of like what set me off was I was like, we can all do better. Like, why does nobody care about this? Like, what's happening? And then the other thing that happened was like that week is when Do Kwon blew up.
Yeah.
So, like,
like the thing about Tokamak that never made sense to me is it's like it basically was like trying to, I don't know, there were a few red flags with that whole project. One is it was like they were super into like techno babble and like, and then like once you actually like dug into like how the protocol actually worked, like, I don't know, like the curve wars kind of like made people just assume that you could just extract value by voting for things.
Yeah.
And I never really understood like that protocol, like the way it worked is it's like super capital inefficient, right? Because like you have to buy tokamak just to like get, or you know, you got to go through the whole voting thing, and you've got to like, in order to get money to move around and liquidity to move around, it requires all these votes. And like that's one of my issues long term with Curve too, is just that like ultimately
don't stop bet on Curve. don't mind bet on Curve.
Like I mean it's working, and I could be wrong, and that Curve could work forever, but the way I see it is that like it's essentially a form of capital controls that they've implemented, and money and liquidity tend to go where there aren't capital controls. And so like over time, like Uniswap v3 is more capital efficient than Curve is. And like, say you get a few entrenched players that hold all the CRV and all the locked CRV, like over time, like it's just going to ossify. It's just going to ossify. And then what's going to happen is new players are going to have to go elsewhere. And if the votes for Curve become too expensive, then they'll just go somewhere else. And like, so they've locked in a nice little federation of like, as Captain Rational always likes to call it, like a nice little federation of protocols that like all sort of like build off each other. And I do think that
like Mochi Finance and Terra and like.
Well, I was referring more to like Convex and Frax, and you know, like
I think we can have like a good conversation about these DeFi protocols, but like I think that 90% of the things that are happening in DeFi right now are like a direct reflection of like look how hard it is to get capital on chain. And then you get capital on chain, and like there's literally nothing to do other than like see how fast you can spin it around through different tokens to turn the same dollar into more dollars. Like for better or for worse, like that's literally the only options we have. And like that's what Curve's doing. And then like there's some things like GMX where it's like, okay, like there's actually like an application that people can use. And so, you know, but like when the application that people can use is gambling on like the underlying like circle jerk that we're doing, like, well, I again, I'm happy to talk about Curve and Frax and all that stuff, but I just think that like we're in this world that is like limited by like the substrate, right? Like Ethereum's not done. You know, imagine if right now I told you like, Benjamin, I want you to create Google, and I will give you the engineers you need and like the math and whatever you need. Problem is HTTP not done yet.
Yeah.
Like you're fucked. Like
yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, like it, and I think that's true of DeFi too, though. Like I think that there's just a lot of tooling and a lot of like, and I would like to kind of go into this as far as like what you see as the gaps in Ethereum that need to be solved in order to like get us to where we need to go. But like the way I see it, like with DeFi, is there's just so much tooling that is yet to be built. There are things that like we can't do in DeFi, and the bridges to the real world, as you say, like those need to be bigger and faster, and we need legal infrastructure in order to be able to have real world assets that like actually represent wealth and value in the real world traded on chain. Because like I think everybody kind of points to this idea that, hey, all this stuff is just like gambling on and speculating on random tokens and tooling. And it's true that it is, but like some of this stuff will actually be useful once those bridges and like the ability to get stuff on chain and off chain easily, and the legal frameworks in order to actually like have that value transacted not only on a blockchain, but like in the legal sense. Like if I want to sell my house, right? Like there's a potential future where like people have the deed to their house on the blockchain. Like that's not an unreasonable thing to assume. But the thing is, like, there's a whole lot of like completely like there's legal precedents that need to be set there. Like if I click on a dicey transaction and my house gets rugged, like, do I got to move out? Like,
I mean, look, like, okay, there's like 18 different like things like rabbit trails to like go down that, because like this is such like a meaty topic. But I think first and foremost, right, like we can talk about the technology in a second, right? But like the biggest problem we have is regulation. Like, first of all, let me say to all crypto people, like we should be begging for regulation. Like we want to be at the table and help write it. Like we want to like help people understand and like write regulation that is like net positive. But like the reason there's nobody here except for like anons with like racist ape like pictures is because like it's not legal and it's not like safe to do this, you know? And like, look, like Curve, right? Like if any DeFi project is going to make it long term, it's Curve, right? That's like tokenomic based. Like I think that like there's some like interesting stuff there, and it's like capital like blah 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 blah, right? Like let's just imagine a world in which like there's like legal frameworks for, I don't know, BlackRock or Citadel to like do stuff on chain. Like imagine a world where they're just like, hey, we will stable swap every asset for free, like through our private, you know, like through our like corporate ZK rollup that settles to Ethereum, and like we'll do it for free because like that like data flow is worth it for us. Like that's the way the real world works,
right?
And like,
and that's that. It wouldn't be hard to imagine a world where something like that happens.
No,
right?
for sure. But like, we don't even talk about that. We pretend like this, like the way that DeFi works now, where like everything has to exist in this like on-chain permissionless buzzword, like, and it's like, no, man, like Ethereum is what's important. Like we need to build this platform that like is permissionless and like allows anybody to build whatever they want. And like, I've gotten in trouble before by saying like DeFi sucks, like everything's going to go to shit. Like, let me be clear, like I very much encourage everyone go build whatever the fuck they want, right? Because like the point of Ethereum is that like that's what it is. Like anyone can do anything. The problem with Ethereum is like the only people that are willing to do stuff right now are like the 400 of us builders and then like 40,000 scammers. But like I sometimes like I'm so frustrated with like this community because like we're computer scientists and we're nerds and we're kids, and like we don't really have any understanding of like how the actual world works.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot to be learned there, and then there's a lot of like, I mean, I think even a lot of the TradFi people like see the glimmer of hope that is available here, because like these rails that are being built, like they need certain tools that the TradFi people can see which tools are missing.
No, for sure.
And
like,
they're going out there and they're trying to build them and to be the first ones. But, you know, I haven't been super impressed with some of the, like a lot of the TradFi people too, because they build this like complex, like, you know, some like interest rate swap protocol or whatever. And then they just like attach some like Ponzinomic tokenomics to it. And then it's like, do you really understand this, or do you just understand this like one whole like tiny little part of how this works? Like, because
and sorry, I actually don't know you guys that well. If you guys have like, if I'm about to insult you, I apologize. But like I came from corporate finance, and like I believe in finance. I believe like that is like what we've been doing as a human society, and like how we control like capital and energy, and like I believe in finance. I don't believe in high finance. Like I definitely think that most of like what Wall Street is exactly the same what's happening on chain. It's just like with bankers in suits and this extractive like cycle of money going round and round. And so like, I think those are the TradFi people we've attracted. And like,
Yep.
one of like the reason when I heard Hayden Adams and I realized that like permissionless, decentralized, blah, blah, blah. And then I got on chain and I sent myself like thousands of dollars and like, it just happened. And like everyone here has like had stupid stuff with banks and we like blah, 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 blah. But like, I used to be the cash manager for Anheuser-Busch. Like it was $20 billion a year that I was responsible for. And like one story, we like divested like a huge brewery, and then we had to pay a tax bill. I think it was like $1.7 billion. And so like that day, the CFO was like, I'm going to sit behind you until the wire clears. So like I'm on, like I've got like Bloomberg here. I'm like on my laptop, and like literally the way that we send a wire is like I just send it like link to our like bank, you know, that like to run the papers that we've been talking about for 2 weeks. And then for like 5.5 hours, I just sat there with the CFO of like the second largest consumer company's products in the world sitting behind me, watching my screen. Like, come on, you guys know, like, there's no real work in corporate America. Like, I was literally just like looking up the price of like aluminum all day. But and like, you know, every once in a while I'd be like, where's the wire? What's the status? And I would just like have to like link the guy at the bank, and he's like, what do you want me to say? Like, in the system? Like,
yeah, because there's like this whole like clearing process that happens when you send a wire, right? Because it's got to go like through Fedwire, and it's got to go like to some like correspondent bank that's then got.
And it just like depends on like who you're sending it to and who you're sending it from, and like your relationship with like the specific like nodes on that like capital network. And like, I mean, it like, and you know, on like whether I'm sending like $10 to the Ethereum Foundation to get that POAP, or like 6 or 7 figure, or like, you know, like Ohm can send their entire treasury in the exact same way. Like that is what TradFi like, okay, what non like brainworms TradFi people, when they see Ethereum, that like that's what's like, that's the crypto rails and like the better financial system.
Yeah.
Like, I don't, there's so much like derivative like masturbation that goes on.
Yeah.
By the way, I apologize for my language. We didn't really talk about this.
That's fine.
You can say what you want. our audience are
bunch of apes.
Yeah.
So do you, I think you touched on it slightly there, but do you envisage? Because I know the likes of Aave have got the whole Aave ARC thing going on behind the scenes, with kind of institutional rails behind the scenes. For that kind of capital to flow in, obviously regulatory clarity needs to happen, because no one's going to start deploying billions and billions of dollars into capital for them to get a slap on the wrist or whatever it'll be, or kind of paraded in front of the media and things like that. But do you envisage that's where that capital flow will stay, behind like institutional rails, knowing the counterparty, who's in the money markets with them, who's in the liquidity pools with them? Or do you think they will slowly start participating in public markets, or is that too high of a risk?
I mean, I think as of this November, I'm pretty sure that everyone doesn't give a shit about breaking the law, because it turns out you can just play video games after you're caught. But
and be really bad at them as well.
Yeah. But no. So this, like, I'll shift us back to like the technology conversation, because like I think the answer is like totally no. I think like all this Aave ARC stuff is like a reflection of the fact that the protocol's not done. And like okay, so if you'll indulge me for a second, right? Like Ethereum, so like the whole point of it is it just gives this like generic general purpose computing platform, but that is like decentralized and like protected by the value of ETH, right? And like the way that it works is that like there's individual, like real world computers. I have one in my girlfriend or my fiance's closet, right? That are running the software that like, it's 2 pieces of software. One is like actually holds the computing environment, the EVM. And then the other is, you know, the consensus client that's like running proof of stake, that's like securing the whole thing, right? And the problem with Ethereum today is it's so intense, relatively speaking, to like run a node, right? Like it takes like days to sync. It's like you can do it for cheaper, but I have like $1,000 piece of hardware, days to sync. Like I live in a building that has unlimited internet bandwidth, but it's about 1 terabyte a month. Like it's, and if you like sync offline, like not only does it like start costing you money, but you need to resync, like, and especially like pre-withdrawals, right? Like there's nothing you can do about it. You're stuck in it until whenever, right? And so like to access Ethereum today, your choice is either to do what I'm doing, and like I don't use MetaMask, I use Frame, but like my Frame doesn't use infra. It like goes directly to my node and like accesses Ethereum. Or your other choice is you can use infra or alchemy or whatever. And like essentially all they're doing is they run one single node, or a bunch of them, and then they have like this whole API on top of it that like lets people like just over the internet like access Ethereum, but like infra's doing it for you. And again, they're doing it because it's so freaking hard to access Ethereum directly. Like that is not the end game of Ethereum. Like that is like that is like trying to build Google without HTTP. Like the Ethereum that we're building, and we can talk about like how we get there, but is like MetaMask will just like be able to directly reach into the EVM and like make transactions and like query things. Like there will be no infra, like it'll be able to like just from a very small software package be able to happen directly from your browser. Or like more interestingly, like you can put that small software package into like integrated like chips, right? Like imagine a world in which like every single shipping container can like trustlessly check in with the blockchain like instantly, like wherever, like giving location, giving like imagine if you could buy cargo containers from like that's how Ethereum reaches the real world. It's like it becomes easy to access, and then we like create like trustless lightweight packages that like allow this direct interaction.
Yeah, but how do I securitize and Ponzify a shipping container?
Yeah. I mean, I've got ideas.
Let's build it.
Yeah.
I'm in.
So I think that like once you understand like the roadmap, then we can start talking about like the way things look. And like I'm not gonna like I'm not delusional, right? Like there's gonna be a huge portion that is like basically trusted custodians like an Aave or a Maker who act as this like concentration of capital that either like moves on-chain capital off-chain or vice versa. But like I don't think that is like, I think that's like the equivalent of without like the moral judgment, but like that's like payday loans, right? And like I'm talking about like, no, we're gonna do all of finance.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's like just having those like immutable layer of finance is the most important part. And like, because like especially because of the way the current financial world works, right? Like you have these various financial hubs around the world where the majority of the financial activity takes place. You have New York, which is sort of like, that is where like the regulated activity sort of centers around.
Well, and the unregulated, you just need to know.
Well, there's a lot of unregulated that happens. And so like you have the regulated part, and then you have all the brains that are thinking of ways to get around the regulated part. And they are using these other hubs, which are like the Caymans and Lombard Street in London, and like these regulatory islands where they can kind of ship Seychelles, like all these various like places where the banking regulation is, lax because those countries found it, competitively advantageous for them to basically just make it easy for money to flow through them. And so like you get this regulatory arbitrage that takes place. And like I see Ethereum as being that regulatory arbitrage center in the future, where you don't, those countries are going to have a problem competing with Ethereum. Like, I honestly think that we're not really coming for TradFi as much as we are for those
offshore finance,
all the offshore finance, because
Yeah.
that's all going to move on chain.
Yeah.
And that will be the immutable, trustless, permissionless part. Well, I don't like the word trustless, but permissionless part of finance. And then you can't get away. And we were having a conversation about this on Discord the other day, but like, you can't get away from the government. Like, you can't. You have a house, it's in a country.
Yeah, you breathe air. Like, you want to make sure that the air is not like full of a better one. Like, you drink water, right? Like, you want to make sure the water's not full of toxins. Like,
yeah, the government, like, they have the ability to tax you, throw you in jail. Like, you're not going to just like, oh, hey, I found this stuff on the internet, so now I'm a sovereign man. It's like, what? No, it doesn't work like that. I'm sorry. Like,
is that you, Roger Ver?
Yeah, that dude is down bad.
Yeah.
Like, wasn't it just this week we found out that Roger Ver also owed Genesis like $30 million or something like that? But anyway, that's an aside. But like, I mean, I think that there's a lot of like, circle jerk, as we refer to it, like, of this like whole like trustless, permissionless, like pipe dream that like you have like found this sovereign part of the internet. And like, as long as you're transacting purely in digital goods, that's all well and good. Like, you can use that that permissionless like rail, and you don't ever have to leave it, right?
Yeah.
Like, if I'm just swapping JPEGs, which is honestly the best use case of this technology in its current iteration.
Yeah.
Because it's a digital product and digital money, and you swap them back and forth, and there's nothing wrong with any of that. Like,
I say the best use case today is in gaming. Like, that's obviously like a real, like, that's how you can. I don't think there's good games yet, but that's the right use.
Well, that's my point. Like, that isn't there yet because the game.
No, okay, fine, fair enough.
But like right now, I mean, there's cute little pictures, and you can pay lots of money.
No, fair enough.
So like, I do think gaming will get there, and it is a great use case. But
because it's digital native.
Yeah, absolutely. But like, I think that one, like I said earlier, like, until you get real world assets and bridges between the real world and the on-chain world, all you're going to be doing is swapping monkey picks, because like that's all that's really
possible,
viable.
Yeah.
Because like, it's a digitally native environment. You need digitally native stuff, or you need a way to get not digitally native things onto the chain. Yeah.
I mean, I like, to me, Ethereum is like, it is just like the logical next step of the internet, right? Like, the internet was like actually developed like in the 70s, and like ARPANET and all this stuff, right? But like, let's call like the birth of the internet like 1994 or 5, when Mark Andreessen and Jim Clark launched Netscape, right? Like, that's when like a browser was invented, and we all like experienced it. And then it was like 10 years, and then like Facebook came out. And then it's been like 20 years, and like the UI is like a little bit better. Like, how like conceited do you have to be to think like we're done? Like, the internet's done developing. And like, when I see Ethereum, I just see like, oh, like, we created a communications network. That's great. Like, now we just need to like imbue a sense of property.
Yeah, I think there's like, it's funny because I've been thinking about this like ever since ChatGPT came out.
Yeah.
I was like, why does everybody like? I was like trying to ask myself, like, I mean, this thing took off, and it felt a lot to me. Like, I was young when this happened, but like, I remember when Google came out.
Yeah.
Like, I remember using search engines pre-Google.
Yeah.
And how crappy they were. And then Google came out.
Ask Jeeves.
Ask Jeeves. Alta Vista.
Yeah.
File, web crawler. Like, all those. Like, I remember all that trash, and it sucked, all of it. And like, then Google came out, and it actually gave you like search results that were helpful and helped you answer the questions you were trying to answer. And it's funny because like, when I think about that Google versus the Google we have now for the search part, like just looking at search, like I feel like it's become so, like your attention has become so commoditized in a very sophisticated manner. And it's become so commoditized that like your attention has been bought and paid for by other people now. And it's like, you don't see the stuff you're looking for because that's no longer the game. The game is not, and it's slowly shifted over time from, I'm going to try to show you exactly what you're looking for to, I'm going to show you exactly what you need to see because these people paid me to make you see it. And like, it's sometimes, it's sort of subtle, like that slide that we've taken, but like, I feel like we're kind of like, we sort of hit the reset button with ChatGPT because like now there's this new thing. It's a new like protocol that's like basically like, hey, look at the power of this tool that we've created. Look at the way like you ask a question and it'll give you an answer. It may have completely hallucinated any facts involved with it, but it'll give you an answer. And like sometimes it'll be very useful for you. And like, I think that like what happens is it's just human nature, right? Like you get a system that it starts out, it's nascent, it's useful. It does something that everybody wants. It fits a need. And then slowly over the time, the system gets corrupted because people use it to kind of take advantage of it in different ways. And you're seeing the same thing with high finance, like you were saying. Like that's another system that started off, it was very useful to everyone. It allowed like value to transact across the world globally, allowed people to extend credit and receive credit and leverage assets and things that like allowed us to build the society we have today. But the problem is that over time, that system gets gate kept and like you just see it get slowly corrupted until technology develops to the point where something like Ethereum is born. And then now you've started a new tech stack. And it's like, we're going to build it out and it's going to become more useful. But like, I think it's naive to think that and then the idea, the difference between this tech stack and, the ones that came before it is like, this one is intentionally being built in a way to mitigate that corruption. So, as best as possible. Like, I mean, I do not underestimate humans' abilities to corrupt these things. Right? It may happen, but like, I appreciate the thing that makes me hopeful is the idea that like there is this whole notion that this system is being built in a way that will prevent that sort of corruption, at least mitigate it.
Yeah. No, I mean, Ethereum's definitely going to zero because I heard that Vitalik is really Sifu.
Can confirm.
Yeah. Honestly, it wouldn't be the stupidest thing that's happened in the last year. No, look, I hear everything you're saying and I like agree with your like I guess like I see the same things and almost like see the opposite like bigger picture where like so like all this like offshore finance stuff, like I don't see that as something that like was good and has been corrupted. I see that as something that like was corrupted and through technology, like over thousands of years has become like first like more obvious and then like more accessible. And then it is so hard to like be in the moment and like feel like things are getting better, especially in the last 3 years. But like I like really believe that like the long arc of human history is that like things are getting better, not worse. And I think that like so like the internet like I take an issue with like that there's a difference between Ethereum and the internet because like Ethereum is like being built like in a way that can't be corrupted, right? Because like that is what the internet is, at least today, right? Like, yes, like we could like people who I don't like to whine about how like big tech and Google and blah, right? But like
there's a lot of whining.
But like, let's just say that like I got like my buddy Joe Biden and all the other just like Davos capitalists together, and we're gonna just like and just like shut down the internet. Like let's just say I could get every person with any power to agree to that. Like that just can't happen.
No, it would work. It wouldn't work. And I agree with that, because like money and information, money is information. Like money is just like a subset of information.
Well, I think money is energy. Like I really believe that. Like that is how we control energy and move energy, and like, and I don't mean it in terms of like, you know, that kind of energy. I mean like the human like collective energy of like what we as a society like want to do with our like pitiful existence.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. I agree with that. Like I think that like the internet was built in a very robust way that makes it so that it's so decentralized it can't really be completely stopped by governments. And I feel the same way about money. Like, and that's why like the offshore finance thing, it's, to me, it's neutral. Like the bad part is that like the way the current system is designed, it basically only the super rich have access to those rails. And there's a democratizing part of Ethereum. And you know, the governments may get better at preventing the plebs from like reaching those rails, but like
it's just like the internet, right? Like no matter what happens, like you're always going to be able to get on the dark web, which is just like websites that don't get indexed by Google.
Yes. 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 But it's got a really scary name. So
yeah. And again, I think that I just heard like the most interesting podcast. If anybody cares about like macro or history, there on the Ezra Klein podcast, which is a New York Times podcast, he just had a China expert on who like talked through like the major changes that are going on in China. And like the takeaway from that episode, which like changes my worldview, is that like America and China are like mirror images of each other. And like what the mirror image is that like both societies have unleashed the force of capitalism, which like needs to be contained, because like the logical conclusion of capitalism is one guy has all the money and everybody else has no money. Like that's just how the math works. And so like what we're seeing is that like in America, like because of our like cultures and history and norms and like whatever, like the way that we're trying to deal with this and how it's manifesting. And in China, it's like much more about, you know, like society based and like control and like blah, blah, like all this stuff. Right. But like, I think when you just like take a step back out of like our individual lives and even like, and you just like look at what is happening in these broad strokes, it's like, it makes so much sense to me that these like two huge, like civilization sized countries are trying to deal with this like ultimate corrupting force. And then suddenly, like when it's all literally burning down in 2008, like look what just pops up, like an alternative, you know, like this is just like so clear to me that like when we look back in like 50 years, it's going to be like the writers got so lazy they invented Bitcoin in the 2008 financial crisis. Are you kidding me? And then like then they had a COVID pump like 12 years later. Like, come on, you know, like too perfect. And like the Russian sanctions, the Iran shit, like Trump came in and removed the sanction, like put back the sanctions to show that like we need this. Like, sorry, I'm talking about the Iran nuclear deal and how like we were like entering a world that was more globalized, and then Trump came in. Don't want to get into politics, but he did add them back in. Yeah. It's just like could anybody be making more of a case for like an alternative system?
Yes, absolutely. Like, yeah. So I want to try to reel this all back into liquid staking devices, because we're 44 minutes in, and this has been fantastic. But we haven't really.
It's probably the most sense that we've ever had on a show. Yeah. not just across these two episodes we've done, but across the Blockmates channel as well.
So let's pull back to Ethereum, right? Or zoom in, I guess, because we were at, watching. We were observing from a telescope on Mars, but
Yeah,
like,
dude, I think we were racing Elon on that one.
so zooming into Ethereum and liquid staking devices,
Mhm.
like, I guess, how do you see that changing the way we experience Ethereum right now? Because, like,
Mhm.
I mean, like, looking at the speculative landscape that exists on Ethereum right now, like, I guess, how do you think about like this offer of yield in the form of like the block rewards and stuff,
Mhm.
and how that fits in with like the security of Ethereum and how it fits in with like the overall DeFi landscape, and like, where do you see that going?
I think that so first of all, like, I am just like downright confused why anybody thinks that like Shanghai matters for this like topic. I think that like it matters for people, like individuals who are running nodes at home that like put in some ETH when the beacon chain launch and like are sick of it, and like they'll get their ETH out and like they're probably not going to sell. But like,
I mean, they might, because like the
like,
beacon chain
even
started in like December 2020,
yeah,
and like ETH was like $300, and like
I just
they were making like 15-20% a year, or like,
yeah. No, listen, maybe some people will take out, maybe they'll sell. Like, I don't care. I just think that in terms of like the LSD conversation, like there seems to be like this huge like sense that like the second Shanghai happens, there's just going to be this like massive like reorganization of like which like LSD protocols like have TVL, and like everyone thinks like a bunch of ETH is going to leave Lido for what that is bonkers to me. Why do people think ETH is going to leave Lido?
I guess, let me play devil's advocate here.
Yeah, sure.
Because like Lido,
I'm just going to bring this up while you do it.
So like Lido, I've heard a lot of complaints about their tokenomics, right? They sort of front loaded. They pulled the typical DeFi thing and then just, basically used their token. They spit it out like crazy in order to incentivize people to lock with them. Granted, they had first mover advantage over Rocket Pool and Coinbase and a lot of these others. So they also had first mover advantage.
Yeah.
But the thing is, there's also a second mover advantage that comes later when you can actually like remove things from Ethereum. Like, those tokens aren't totally locked anymore, right?
Yeah.
Like a new player could come in and throw a new Ponzi token out that would incentivize that just as much. Like,
yeah.
And I think you could.
Sorry, are you talking about cracks?
Well, no, I mean, I'm talking about literally anyone, because that's the thing about DeFi is it's like, there's this whole game that takes place with like devaluing your token. You just like, you front load it. And if you are basically emitting your token like in a greater degree than you are like actually adding value to the world, over time, you're eventually going to lose that power and authority that comes with that token, and somebody new is going to come along. And like that new token is going to get everybody excited, and they're going to all want that token because that one hasn't been depreciated to hell. And so like, I could see a world where you have flows over time leaving Lido because the token's been so depreciated that they can't keep the money there, and that liquidity drains out.
I am like much more bearish on like the concept of tokens long term. Like I imagine a world in which like this whole token thing goes away. And like, if you want like the most like poignant reason, I actually didn't know about this until a friend like told me, and I was just like, how are we all not talking about this? But are you guys familiar with the UkiDAO case?
A little bit.
So
I'm not familiar. No.
Sorry to cross promote here, but the Flywheel podcast just yesterday came out with an interview with Alex, a lawyer named Alex, who's the chief legal officer at Umami Labs. And
that guy's really good.
Oh yeah.
I've heard a Twitter space with that guy. He's
First of all, like everyone like that's a smart guy. But so go listen to that podcast, because like what you will learn is that there's like currently a case, like we're all at risk of being told by like the US judicial system that like tokens are bullshit, and if you hold a token, you have like liability for that DAO.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
like,
I mean, basically, my understanding of that case is that like basically anyone, the government is basically saying that anyone who voted in a governance vote was liable for what that DAO did and any laws that it broke.
Yeah, and honestly, like the episode came out yesterday. I haven't listened to it, but like I'm friends with Alex, so I know about it. I need to go like get the details. But like my point is just that like I think that like everything that we see today is like a reflection of like the regulatory arbitrage, and just like you, just to be like explicitly clear to anyone who is not a computer scientist or a developer, like what a token is like literally just like a piece of code that has like numbers in it, you know, like, and like pick a token, like the Uniswap token, right? Uni. It's like literally just a smart contract that like anybody deployed, that just like, it just has like lists of like Benjamin has like 20, Haym has like 30, you know, Grant has like 10, and like,
oh, you're poor.
Yeah.
And it's just like
I've been bad trader.
Yeah. And so I just like, we're so lost in the sauce here. Like when we're talking about tokens, like we've already like taken so many assumptions about like what this particular piece of code means, like why that particular piece of code has value, why that particular value is somewhat analogous to like the equity value, which is like only based out of the legal system. And like, and some, but we say we don't have a legal, like none of this makes sense, right? And I just think that like it's just like a reflection of like how young and like this is like the GeoCities era. And so like what I think about LSDs, right? Like what's important? Number one is like, first of all, like what everyone needs to understand, we can talk about this if you want, but like all of the yields, they're going to be the same. That's just like, there's not going to be differentiation among the yield. And like, that is on purpose by design of the Ethereum protocol. Like they are building in proposer builder separation specifically so that like different stakers aren't earning more yield, because like that's a centralization vector. If like different stakers can earn more yield, then over time, proof of stake says that staker will control the network. So like, let's just call all the yields flat, like plus or minus, but like they're all flat, right?
Yeah.
Then like, so, okay, yeah, like you can have some differentiation between like how, like what % fee the staker takes, but like that'll just normalize, you know? Like,
so to that point,
yeah.
To that point, here's a question that I have, because I know that you are into like eigenlayer.
Yeah.
Right. And so like the whole game theory here is basically that Ethereum wants to make sure that everybody's yields are the same.
Mm-hmm.
But once you start stacking on other means of getting yield using the same stake, is that not just going to push those protocols to partner with other various like, data availability or whatever things we come up with to stack on top of the security budget of ETH, basically? Like, at what point do we just stack too much on that security budget? And like, does it start to centralize again? Because, maybe somebody partners with Eigenlayer. Eigenlayer becomes the standard DA layer, and Eigenlayer only works with Rocket Pool.
Yeah.
And so now if you use Rocket Pool, you are the only ones that are basically getting the most yield. And so like you basically have to give up that yield if you want to keep Ethereum decentralized. So like I see a vector there where this could,
Yeah.
like I said, humans will find a way to ruin anything.
Okay, so I really want to get back to eigenlayer in one moment, but like,
Okay.
So for like when I say that like LSD yield will like normalize, like what I'm talking about is specifically like if you take the yield that a validator generates and wrap it in a token, that will normalize. Like you can do interesting shit with that token to change the yields, and like that is what Frax is doing, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't know if we really want to talk about like the whole thing there, but essentially what they're doing is like being clever about like splitting. They're putting all of their ETH in the staked product, so it's generating yield, but they're like have a different thing for you to do with like your ETH derivative that like isn't. Basically, like you can put it in the curve pool and you can earn curve based APR, and what that does is like concentrate more of the ETH based staking APR into the derivative. And so what they've done is created like an interesting product like to the consumer that is still like getting the same like base yield, underlying yield. So like that's what I'm talking about when I say like it's going to normalize. Is that clear? And then we can kind of talk about like the implications of that. But I want to go to eigenlayer because like first of all, like apologies to anyone listening that you're about to get lost on, because like it's just like a new project that like you kind of have to understand. But
if you're not familiar with it, like,
well, but because this is so Sriram, the founder of Eigenlayer, I think like made a really huge mistake, and I understand why he did it because it's like helpful to understand what the platform is. But like, you don't have to have Eigenlayer on staked ETH. Like the point of Eigenlayer and like the insight of Eigenlayer is that like what they've realized is that like the point of proof of stake is that you take a centralized action, which is like a proposed block or an attestation or like anything that happens within Ethereum, and you turn it trustless. And like, Benjamin, you don't like that word, but like what that word means is that like based on like the slashing conditions that are written in code that like anyone can see and verify for themselves, anyone can know that like the amount of damage that you could possibly cause is going to cost you more money than it's worth. Right. So like, and that is like what trustless is a shorthand for, that like there's a crypto economic like assumption that like even if someone wanted to attack it, that there's not a like economically viable way to do it. And like that's what proof of stake is, like super cool. But like the problem is that like the more proof of stake networks you create, the more you take like the available capital that's interested in turning this centralized thing into a trustless thing and like fracture it across like more and more things, right? So like already we have Avalanche, Solana, Cardano, right? Like those are the proof of stake chains, right? And then we've got like the Link token, right, which is securing Chainlink. And then we have the Eigenlayer is going to have a token that secures like EigenDA, you know, and like and like each time what that does is like, yes, it creates this like valuable asset in a specific token, but it makes everything less secure than it could be. And
I guess that's true, but like to some extent, it's like I think there's sort of a Darwinian aspect to this where if a network is not being used, eventually it will die.
Is that true though? Like go look on the CoinGecko top 20.
Well, nothing has died yet because there's still a lot of money in this like system relative to the amount of like, you know, cost required to maintain these networks.
Yeah.
And so like as time goes on, and
the cost required to maintain these networks is literally zero because they're printing it out of thin air.
Well, there's still a cost associated with truly decentralizing this stuff, right? Like there's an opportunity cost. There's lots of various costs that are keeping these things running in order to keep those like economic assumptions viable. And so like eventually the way I see it, what'll happen is like Avalanche might die, right? Like Avalanche goes away, all that liquidity slowly just goes to where it's more, they get more yield, right? Like, because eventually spitting out their token isn't going to be enough, and there's going to have to actually be like economic transactions taking place on the network in order for this thing to stand on its own two legs.
Yeah.
Bitcoin, take note.
I know.
And and so like you need.
Don't talk shit about my favorite NFT.
That's right. So that's just an NT.
Yeah.
Or an FT. That's an FT.
Yeah, it's an FT.
That's an FT. But you think your Bitcoins are better than mine?
Yeah.
But
they definitely were more expensive than yours.
Don't worry, I bought some at the top over there too. But
no, I hear what you're saying. I think the concept with EigenLayer is that like if you are able to like set what Sriram did is like built this like company and this narrative around like, okay, you're already staking ETH and that makes sense to you. Like we're gonna just like put this overlay on top of it where like other services can use the same thing. But like here's the thing, like there's no fucking reason you have to do that. Like you could just say like we're gonna put $100 million of USDC up for slashing. And like that is now your like the crypto economic capital base that like gives your like say Oracle service or bridge or data availability service like its trustless properties. And so like when people like get like really concerned and lost in this like, okay, well, what happens if you continue to stack stuff on top of EigenLayer, and like what does that mean for Ethereum? What I would say is like, I mean, I guess I like in the logical conclusions, like we could come up with some like pretty scary stuff. But like if we're looking at like how this will actually play out, it's like if things start to get scary, that's like a great problem to have. And we can just like create new, like it's a great problem to have because it means people like believe in this, believe in creating trustlessness through non-native, non-bullshit tokens. And then
this isn't going to be something that just like black swans you one day.
Yeah.
Where it's just like there will be people going, hey, look, like the value of what's securing this is like approaching the amount of value on the chain. Like eventually you're not going to see this coming out of nowhere. Like,
right. Exactly.
You know, it's something we'll have time to engineer solutions.
And like, so the reason it's like I literally watched the A16Z thing that Sriram did on EigenLayer. And like, I watched that and like instantly got it. And I was like, this is what Ethereum is. Like, this is the whole point of Ethereum. It's like to turn ETH into this like collateral that like for anything in this world, like nation states don't work anymore. Everything's falling apart. But like we have this new collateral that can turn anything into trustless. If you believe in this like crypto economic trustless concept, right? But so I like that's when I fell in love. That's when I started threading. But like the more I thought about it, the more I'm like, why is he building a company? Like, why isn't this an EIP? You know, like we're just talking about like. And so you want to know what? Like I flew out to University of Washington and I asked him that. And the two responses, so good. And by the way, sorry, Sriram, if I blow up your stuff right now. But number one is that what he said is like very practical. It's just like the EIP process is like very, very like cumbersome and difficult and challenging for good reason. But like it's hard to move quick. Fair enough. But number two is what he said is, look, like what we're really building here is a general purpose slashing platform. And more specifically, like a general purpose slashing marketplace. And like what we are just trying to do is provide the technology to like put people that have services they want to be trustless together with people that have capital that are willing to put it at risk. And like we're just creating a marketplace and we want to be the first mover. And like that's when everything clicked for me. Like EigenLayer, like this is the point of Ethereum, but EigenLayer is not the point of Ethereum. You know, like they're the Lido of this. And so,
and there's no reason that like Ethereum couldn't build that in later if they felt so inclined.
That's what proposer builder separation is. That it's Flashbots built the thing first, and then like we're like, holy shit, like this is so important not only for MEV, but it allows dank sharding, it allows like all this different stuff. like we have to build it directly into the protocol level and not have it be this sidecar that's like developed by this private or weird. I don't know what Flashbots is. Is that a company?
Yeah, it's a cartel.
I think-
Cabal.
Yeah.
Cabal.
Cabal.
I don't know how to describe them, but yeah, those are all probably apt words to use.
Yes, Sriram will be coming on the Blockmates podcast next week.
Okay. Whoops.
Direct.
I should not have just like said so many
No.
opinions.
No.
No, this will inform that conversation.
Yeah.
That'll be good.
Yeah, exactly. It's good to hear kind of all perspectives going into it. Obviously, I've got a lot of homework to do over the weekend on it myself personally, so it's good to hear kind of people who've been there since it kind of the inception of this kind of product coming into the fore, isn't it? So
Wow.
no, it'll be good.
I'll send you guys some threads, not to self-promote, but
Hey, absolutely.
You send
Absolutely.
send them over.
So, dragging this back to liquid staking devices, because like the whole world of crypto is just it's so easy to just
yeah. Okay, here, let me.
but this podcast is normally about blowing things up and pulling them out to the macro view. So,
It's like weird that we have to keep dragging ourselves
yeah,
back.
we have to drag ourselves back because like
Okay. Well, let me just like
But-
try to lightning round this real quick. Okay. So here's what I think on like Lido is like the most important thing in the short to medium term is that like people who are interested in liquid stake derivatives just like want to use them in DeFi. And so like liquidity is going to be the most important thing. And the second most important thing is going to be integrations into like, Aave and Maker and just like, what like people are going to be more interested in holding a lot like staked ETH as opposed to Rocket Pool ETH if they can take loans against it, right? So like that is like the biggest reason why I like really don't think that there's going to be like a huge amount of like people leaving ETH when Shanghai happens. It's just because like people are using it, right? I think for Rocket Pool, like they're ready to explode and get just as big as like Lido, and like this ecosystem will benefit from it. But like there's like a scaling problem there. It's like super simple. It's like they don't have enough node operators. That's just like the reason there's not enough RPL ETH is because like they can't get enough people to run like validators, and unlike Lido, they don't allow like we don't need to get into it, but like point is that Lido just like allows all of the ETH to go to like somewhere between 10 and 20 validators, and Rocket Pool is like we're spreading it everywhere.
Right. And that's why Rocket Pool is more decentralized, but
for sure, yeah,
that makes it harder to get 32 ETH in order to fill those bins.
There's like definitely things you can do to like and that they're working on to handle that. Like one example is like Rocket Pool myself, the node operator, needs to bring 16 ETH for every validator.
Right.
Like if you get slashed in like assuming that there's not like a mass slashing event, but in an individual slash, the most you can get slashed is like, I think it's 4 ETH. So like you could reduce the capital requirements for the node operators from 16 to 4. And that right there is a 4-fold increase. Right. Yeah. And so like there are definitely ways you can scale Rocket Pool, but like a big reason that I don't think Shanghai is like going to be that big a deal for Rocket Pool is because like their scaling problems are not that there's not ETH interested.
Well, and I think real quick, we should go over what Shanghai actually is. Because,
okay. Yeah.
Like, and I mentioned this on a previous Blockmates podcast before pre-exit liquidity debut. I mentioned this before, but there's a great paper by Data Always where they basically broke down like how they were trying to like, game theorize how this is going to play out. And the thing about Shanghai is it doesn't let you pull out all your ETH.
Yeah.
It only lets you pull out down to the 32 that you've committed. So your principal can be removed, or everything but your principal can be removed. So any additional ETH that you've gained in yield can be removed. And even that ETH has to wait in a queue to get out.
Yeah. So here, do you want me, the real quick rundown is that like, so when Shanghai hits, they're basically like within the first week, every incremental ETH that's been earned by every validator is going to be swept out. And so like everyone's going to be dropped down to 32 within the first week. Then after that, it's going to be like individual node operators can opt into withdrawing, but that is like going to be part of like a withdrawal queue that is like just as aggressive as the deposit queue, meaning that like in the, let's say
one in, one out.
Yeah, sort of. It's like 4 in, 4 out.
Okay.
But yeah, but
fair enough.
Yeah. But point is, it's like, okay, even in the world where it's like every single person wants to withdraw, first, like we're gonna get this like very relatively like I've been staking for a year. My ETH validators are all at like 33 and change ETH. So like that, like we're all gonna get just like a tiny, relatively speaking, amount. And then after that, like, yes, it's possible that everyone could want to pull out, but like Ethereum will sequence it so that like not like Ethereum will stay secure. The market will be able to accept the sell pressure. Like
it's not gonna just dump. I didn't mean to imply that it would, because like and in that Data Always post, like he basically like went through why it's not going to dump when that happens. Like the sell pressure it's not big enough to really.
It's significantly less than the proof of work sell pressure.
Right. Yeah. So like it basically, for a very brief period of time, it'll be like kind of like it was back in the proof of work day, like a normal day back then. And so like it's fine. It's not a big deal. You know, like I don't think. I think that whole thing is very overblown. But I do think it does provide some interesting things from like a liquidity perspective, right? Yeah. So like
you can
the whole ETH staked ETH.
Yeah.
Like those LP pairs, like every time something crazy happens, you get a big wick down, you get liquidations on them, and then eventually you start draining that liquidity pool, and the pegs start tanking on all of those LP pairs. As soon as Shanghai happens, it's basically like the equivalent of like GBTC getting a withdrawal mechanism, right? Like it's going to have a mechanism by which you can bring it back up to the net asset value of that LP pair. And so like I think the big takeaway of what's going to happen is that all those, as soon as Shanghai happens, all those pegs are going to go to 1.
Yeah. Well, no, I don't think it's like, it depends on how aggressive like the withdrawal queue maintains, because like if it still turns out that in perpetuity it takes like 2 months always to withdraw ETH, then like there's going to be 2 months of premium.
There would be some premium. I guess it would depend on kind of like, what it would become a more of a market-based premium, and you wouldn't get these like liquidity squeezes, right? Like
exactly. Like we remember how many times last year did we have to worry about like wrap staked ETH getting squeezed and like ruining the entire industry?
Oh yeah. I mean, but like it wasn't going to ruin anything, honestly. It was just going to wreck some, some lenders like. Because well, that too. Like, I mean, that's the whole thing. Is like, it's basically like leveraging Ohm, but like to a lesser degree. Like it's or GBTC for that matter. Like. You've taken what is essentially a closed-ended fund. You can think of it as like a closed-ended fund, and you've levered it. And, that works great until it doesn't, and everybody wants out at once. And then you have to fire sailing it because there's no liquidity.
Yeah.
And that's what happened to Genesis this last week with GBTC, or a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
With GBTC, where the premium went even further below net asset value. And like,
when do you guys start buying, by the way? Like at what % discount on ETH is it worth it to buy ETH?
I know.
Like would you buy it 90% off? Like,
yeah. I mean, it really depends on, so like it's a duration mismatch, right?
Yeah.
You've got like people that need money now, like the liquidators, because they don't want to take the price risk.
Yeah.
People that need money now, and if you're a person that doesn't need this money for 6 months, you'd be dumb not to take a 90%, off, or I mean 10% off ETH, staked ETH. Like that's a great bet. But like, it's just a matter of like, what is your time frame? You know?
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, I mean, I think that like that, I think the most important thing that everyone needs to understand is like what the actual dynamic of withdrawals are, which like we just covered, right? And I think that once people understand that, like Shanghai becomes less of an event and it just becomes more of a, like the rules change and we can, to your point, like peg stability changes, and like maybe Frax's whole deal about like what they're doing with Curve like starts to make a lot less sense because like no one gives a shit about pegs anymore. Right. So like I totally agree that it changes things, but I just like when this happens, right? Like I truly believe that the second Shanghai hits, like a significant amount of Ethereum will choose to start staking, not be withdrawn. And I think that like, because it'll be significantly de-risked.
Yes,
like, hell,
absolutely.
I'm sitting on like many validators that I could do right now. And I'm just thinking like, well, why wouldn't I just wait 2 months? So I know I can get it back.
Right, exactly. I think that is an under talked about part of this, because like I think you probably will see net inflows versus outflows.
Yeah, so like let's talk about that, right? Like let's say there's net inflows, and like so like there's a ton of ETH that wants to come in, right? Let's be real, they want to go into Rocket Pool, but they just can't, right? Like there's just not enough capacity there. So then the choice becomes like, okay, we can go into basically stake-wise, right? Well, we can go into Coinbase ETH, I guess. You can go into like
you get blacklisted.
You can go into stake-wise, which, to be clear, like today is not like a decentralized permissionless protocol. Today, it's essentially like a junior brother to Lido. Okay. But like in the future, they're gonna have permissionless vaults, and like they'll look a little bit more like Rocket Pool, and you can like, but they're just like not ready yet, and like they don't have the name that everyone else has, and they don't have like the network, and they don't have like the integration into DeFi and like the liquidity to support liquidations and like all of this stuff. And so like when I see, let's call it for fun, April 1st is when Shanghai drops, and like let's say like 5 million ETH like want to get staked. Like the question is just going to become like, where can that ETH go? And like what I see is like, well, Lido can accept like literally infinite amounts because like they don't care, that they'll just keep putting it on one guy. And then Rocket Pool can't do anything. And stake-wise, like, yeah, they'll grow. They'll definitely grow. Frax, I love Sam to pieces, but like it is so fucking funny to me that we call that decentralized or anything else other than like some kid running a validator.
Yeah. Like, yeah, it's very easy to just like throw a token and like call it decentralized. Hey, look, all these people own this token. But like at the end of the day, someone is running that node, like
I'm running a Rocket Pool node right now. Like within an hour, I could go deploy a smart contract that says, here's the Haym token. If you send me your 16 ETH, I'll give you 16 Haym tokens, and then I will take your 16 ETH and deploy a Rocket Pool mini pool. I'm a liquid staking service.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that you're going to see a lot more of that, to be honest.
Isn't that what Richard Hart did? He called it a sacrifice.
That is what Stakewise is, though. That's what they allow. Like that is like the whole point of Stakewise. And so like I think we'll see a lot of that. And like I think we'll see a lot of like really, really tragic stories out of that. But I like, it really confuses me that anyone thinks that Shanghai is an event. Like it's going to be like the merge. It's like there was like some stupid like call, and we all like. I
mean, to some extent, we're all in like whoever's left right now.
Well, okay, fine.
You're pretty much in it for the tech at this point, right?
Yeah,
and this is very much like an in it for the tech sort of milestone here.
Fair enough.
And so like
no. Yeah, to be clear, like I love the enthusiasm and like I want to talk about it, but like what I don't understand is like I know many DAOs that are like positioning themselves for Shanghai or like building product roadmaps around like this thing happening. And like I guess my thought is that like this should be something that's like celebrated as a community, but is like really should be like, it's a problem if it's like in your business plans.
Well, and I mean, I think there are some like assumptions, right? That like it changes, like especially in DeFi and just like I said, the liquidity profile of liquid staking tokens is going to change. It's going to go 0 to 1, like in a different way, where like it de-risks not only stuff for investors, but it's going to de-risk for lending protocols. Like there are knock-on effects throughout the DeFi ecosystem here that are relevant. But like, is it a game change? Like, is it a complete game changer? No, like it's incremental. Like so many of these things. I mean, like, 559. Like these are all like the through the various stops along the way. So I think that it's only a matter of time before we just move the ball far enough down the field that when we look back, we'll say, hey, this like, look how far we've come.
Yes.
So,
yeah. No, I agree. I know that I say like things that are not nuanced sometimes. And I do agree that this is like a big moment for Ethereum, and like we all should celebrate it and be excited about it. But I think that like the LSD game and the Ethereum game like moves like in years and decades. And like that's so hard for us to understand in this specific industry and as us and humans and like with technology. But like that is like the way that people need to be thinking about like what's happening.
Right. Because like in the meantime, on the day-to-day basis, everybody, well, some of us are thinking in years and decades. The majority of the people that are captured by this space are looking for 20% gains by tomorrow.
I'm on the 1 minute candle. Well, you guys on the decades.
Yeah. So like it's just again, duration mismatch.
Yeah.
Like,
all right, boys, I gotta log off because I gotta go buy some ETH.
All right, very good, man. It was a pleasure having you. This was a fantastic discussion. Everybody should go follow SalomonCrypto. We'll put his. I'll try to put his info on the YouTube video, and we'll talk to you later, man.
Man, thank you guys so much, and really appreciate it. And tell Sri Ram I'm sorry.
All right.
Welcome anytime, Haym. Thanks for coming on.